You know, there's something structurally wrong with our towns and centres where businesses are paying more in business rates than they are in rent.
Now we're in it up to our necks.
Whole range of statutory and non-statutory decision makers wanting to now make radical change.
This is a new world and we're facing some very different challenges.
Consumer behaviour has changed.
There's still an obvious shortage of staff in key industries.
Because it's much, much better than we expected.
I don't want to blame anyone else for my successes or failures.
Our forecast for this year has been really encouraged and amplified by the whole range of statutory and non-statutory decision makers wanting to now make radical change. So not just talk about it, but actually start the progress and the how, so not the what, but the how, in terms of green infrastructure, about social equity and equality, and really thinking about how we can reset sustainable and inclusive cities. And it's very marked actually that our clients, both in terms of the public sector and the private sector, are now demanding that. So yeah, that's part of our forecast. At the moment, in terms of key decision makers and the legislation around the planning system, we've still got some way to go. It's clunky, it's time consuming, but I think the principle-led approach, because of our urgent crises in social and environmental issues, means that we have no choice anymore. So I'm encouraged by the fact that key decision makers are asking for policies now as part of our toolkit to get us to that transition to net zero.
Tenant take-up for the best of the buildings, excellent. Both homegrown tenants, US tenants, European tenants, quite amazing compared to what we expected and what was happening during the pandemic. Whatever my fears were, and I very much remember our conversation, have been accelerated, unfortunately, because of the situation in Ukraine. If I remember, we talked about inflation, especially in the construction industry, much worse than it was in March. Supply, the European problems of employment, etc., coming to this country, much, much worse. Very, very worried about that particular situation. As we get nearer to an election, 24 or whatever, I think they'll have to reduce taxation dramatically, which would probably help. But no, I think we've got a high inflation, steel, bricks, you name everything that goes into a building. It's not going to be coming down in the near future. But you should talk to some of the construction guys here soon. But yeah, big problems. I'm 77 years old. I've seen it all before. Nothing gives me sleepless nights. The only thing I would say, and I tell the younger people this is a small island. We ain't making any more land. We have the best lease system in the world. It's now 10 years as opposed to 25 years when I was first in the business. Fully repairing, insuring, etc. So we're the best commercial investment market in the world, full stop. And that ain't going to stop. And you know, we referred to trouble in the world before. Unfortunately, the more trouble in the world, the more cash will flow into this country for the best of the commercial real estate. Full stop.
Look, it's been a very changing couple of years as well, but we're actually better than I thought we were in terms of retail sales and coming back. So we're going to hit about £8.6 billion here in the West End this year, which is great. But the better news is the Elizabeth line is finally going to open, and I've been predicting that for the last 4 or 5 years. So good news this year, and hopefully on Jubilee weekend we're going to see it open, which has been a long time coming. Our fears are we're not going to get the volume of customers back that we had before. However, what we're seeing already is that people are coming, they're spending more as well. So you've got to think about the volume of people versus the profitability. So office workers 3 days a week, not 5. If they're spending the same they were doing 5, that's good news for us. So, you know, there's a fear that won't bounce back as quick as we want and when we want. However, the structure is there and the demand is there. So I think it is positive, the trends we're seeing so far. This government's quite challenging at the moment because there seems to be a lot of policy and we've come through quite a challenging period and there was a huge backing by the Treasury to get us through COVID. But some of the industries, the property industry has a lot of legislation coming its way now. We've still got to sort out business rates. It's been a fundamental issue, even pre-COVID or pre-Brexit. There's something structurally wrong with our towns and centres where businesses are paying more in business rates than they are in rent. I think also we've got to be able to allow local authorities and planning and licensing to really think about the future consumer, the future business. But the biggest challenge, and we all talk about it, and I need to talk about it more, is sustainability. We've got to find a way to get to net zero. We've got to find a way literally to save the planet and the people. And there's a long journey still to go, I think, for our sectors that we work with here in the West End.
Forecasting what's going to happen with tourism has been the absolute holy grail of the last 2 years. And there's been so many lockdowns and changes in regulation, not just in the UK, but in the global source markets, which are so important to us. And so it's been really difficult to get a sense, as we've been able to in the past, 6 months, 12 months out, of what's happening. And that's partly because the regulations have moved a lot, but it's because consumer behaviour has changed. The indicators are looking good for this summer, and I am confident we're going to see a really strong return of international tourism this summer into London, particularly from the US, which is a really important source market for us, from the Middle East and from Europe, our short-haul markets. Obviously, Asia is much more difficult because there's still a full lockdown in China and quite stringent restrictions in a lot of our other big Asian source markets.
Of course, if you extract World War III from this year, I'd say it's pretty much working as I expected. The pressures on staffing because, we lost a lot of people, not because of Brexit, but basically because of the pandemic. And although we've seen very healthy numbers of migrants coming back into the UK, you're not supposed to say that, but it happens to be true, there's still an obvious shortage of staff in key industries, construction, which I know, and ironically, of course, my other hat on in Soho Estates in the hospitality business, where I'm still seeing restaurants even now only able to operate maybe 5 days a week instead of 7. That's quite something, and that's certainly not what I would have expected. One thing I didn't expect to see was inflation very close to double digits inside a period of almost less than a year when, we'd almost thought inflation was a historic issue that we would never go back to. Now we're in it up to our necks, and of course, one of the great sort of potential outcomes is what's called stagflation, where you get wage inflation, you get cost inflation, but you get zero growth in the economy, and that's really bad. So, the world has turned upside down, literally. Mr. Putin is largely responsible for that. The pandemic has been responsible for that, and maybe even to a limited extent Brexit, although I think that's the least of the three. This is a new world, and we're facing some very different challenges from the ones that I think anybody would have projected for the United Kingdom in 2022.
We've had a fantastic bounce back since COVID, but I'm sort of still concerned. It's early days, not so much for us, but more for other retailers. I see a lot of boarded up shops, and what is going to be the state of our high streets, what is going to be the state of our town centres, how these businesses that didn't get any income for the past 2 years going to be sustainable now that there's no rent enforcement moratorium. One thing, call me cynical, but I'm not going to worry about macroeconomic situations. I'm not going to worry about how much the government is going to mess things up. I'm not going to worry about Brexit. I'm just going to focus on what's directly in front of me. I'm going to try to create the best business that I can create. I'm going to really try to make sure that my staff really enjoy working at Box Park. We've got a fantastic environment. I'm going to put my customer first, make sure to keep loving coming back. We've got a real cost of living, crisis at the moment. I'm going to make sure it's really affordable to come back to Box Park, and I don't care whatever else is happening in all the rest of the environments. I'm just going to try and make Box Park special for the people that come there. I don't want to blame anyone else for my successes or failures. When they talk about recessions or whatever. They're only 1 or 2% reductions in economy. I only care about what I'm in control of, and that's all I want to do. I want to just make sure that my employees enjoy working for me and my customers like coming to Box Park. That's what I'm in control of, and I want to come to work with a smile.